It's funny. I'm always terrible at thinking of them on the spot, but there are quite a few that I love. I guess Interstellar, if that counts as a time travel movie, I think it kind of counts. Star Trek First Contact is another good one. Days of Future Past, my favorite, one of my favorite X-Men movies, at least. It's probably number two for me, like right underneath Logan. You got Days of Future Past, which I just absolutely love that movie. Worst time travel movies, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of really bad time travel movies out there. I just can't think of any I've seen. I'm just kind of like right now looking through what I Googled time travel movies, and I'm looking through them right now, trying to see if there's any that I would say are really bad that I've actually seen. I guess the only one that really kind of comes up here, I wasn't the biggest fan of Project Almanac. I thought that was just kind of a really mediocre, bland movie, but I guess that other people kind of liked it. So, I guess that's my answer for like a bad time travel movie. All right. So next live viewer question is from John Schuyler. Um, so this is a question about the 30th anniversary of Power Rangers and the character of Yen possibly being the daughter of Trini, and basically asking about my thoughts on that. So, I mean, I try not to get my hopes too high up for this 30th anniversary season because a lot of information I've been hearing about it is really coming from people on Twitter, and I try not to like take that as like actual facts or confirmation. I hope a lot of things that I've been hearing about this 30th anniversary end up being true. Like, I hope we get the original cast back, even if it is for just an episode. I hope we get to see some Legacy Rangers return, and I would love to see like a mix and mash of different Rangers, and have that be like a team, like essentially kind of like what we got in Operation Overdrive in the anniversary special. I would love to see something similar to that, where it's like one Ranger, a different color from several different teams, all teamed up together for like one big common evil, big threat. I think that would be kind of a fun way to do it. But it kind of comes down to just me not wanting to get my hopes too high up, because while I'm not expecting the 30th anniversary to be like a super mega force type of bad writing, I'm not exactly expecting it to be like a masterpiece or anything like that. But I am excited for it nonetheless. And yeah, I try not to get too excited every time I see a rumor online. And the second question from John Schuyler is, how excited are you for the new Thor movie, and what do you hope the movie does and doesn't do? Well, what I hope it does do is I hope it has a lot of fun with itself, and I really hope we get some really good, which I mean, everything I want it to be, I feel like is in the trailer, really. So I hope we get a lot of that in the trailer. What I hope we don't get, though, is I hope it's not just all comedy and action. Like, I hope there is a bit of heart in it, like the same way Taika Waititi kind of did with Jojo Rabbit, which I thought was not only like a hilarious movie, but also a hilarious movie that genuinely actually got me extremely emotional at times. And I feel like if you're doing the Jane Foster storyline and you're involving her, like, having cancer at one point in the story, I feel like you have to have like an emotional weight behind that. So I hope they don't just like kind of ignore the emotional weight. As much as I really enjoyed Thor Ragnarok, I think that was kind of one of my bigger disappointments about it, was that literally, Asgard gets destroyed at the end, and there's kind of more of a joke kind of feeling to it, rather than like the emotional weight that I feel like they really should have carried for something like that. But yeah, overall, I think, yeah, just that's kind of the only thing I hope they don't skip on the emotional weight, and I hope they still have a lot of fun with it, like we kind of see in the trailer. The next question comes from Michael Rhymes. I always hear of movies that were planned on release, but then praised. Wait, what? Sorry. I always hear movies that were panned on release. I'm sorry, but then praised after. Do any of you know of any movies that the opposite happened, where they were praised on release but then deemed bad afterwards? Crash, the movie that ended up winning an Oscar that year, I believe. God, what year did that movie come out? I just remember it won an Oscar, but like a year later, people were like, "This movie is terrible." Yeah, Crash, 2004. That's the movie. It won an Oscar. People absolutely hated it. Like probably year, not hated it. Maybe that's a strong word, but it's just a movie that people, no one understood why that was the one that got an Oscar when they kind of like look back on it. Um, I think that's the answer I'm going to go with for now. I'm sure there's other examples I can kind of think of, but for now, that's kind of what I'm going with. I guess the same kind of can be said with Jurassic World. Like I feel like that had a lot of hype behind it when it first came out, but then like kind of disappointment kind of kicked in a little bit afterwards. Phantom Menace is definitely one where I remember that was like a big thing because when Phantom Menace first got released, I do not remember any hate around that movie at all. I remember excited fans and I remember people loving it. But that was also because I wasn't like the internet was a thing, but I was also incredibly young when the Phantom Menace came out. So of course, I wasn't exactly allowed to go on the internet unsupervised, so I didn't get to see what other people thought of the movie really outside, the people I kind of socialized with, friends and family. So amongst my friends and family, everyone loved Phantom Menace, and it wasn't really until years later where the hate behind it really kind of became more known about it. Anyways, but yeah. So, next question is from Francisco Dubat. I think that's how it's pronounced. Um, who are some people behind the scenes at Marvel Studios who should excuse me, be given more recognition for making the MCU what it is now? Same with the DCEU. Some people behind people who deserve more recognition for making the MCU what it is. God, that's really good question. I mean, I feel like a lot of the people that really shaped the MCU into what it is now already get that recognition. So I'm not too sure. I can't really think of anyone who really would be missing, but I'll just kind of give like the names that I know of. Kevin Feige is kind of the obvious one. Robert Downey Jr. Also, I think was a big help because during Phase 2, one of the issues was that you still had a lot of the actors getting underpaid, and I think that was one of the things that Robert Downey Jr. really helped out on is making sure no one got screwed over, kind of the same way the previous actor that played Rhodey kind of got screwed over when they basically didn't give him a pay raise. They gave Robert Downey Jr. a huge pay raise for Iron Man 2, but they weren't going to do the same to him, and that's why he ended up leaving for Iron Man 2. So I like that Robert Downey Jr. made sure that didn't happen again. So in a way, he kind of helped shape the MCU a lot. And I wouldn't say he deserves more recognition. In fact, I think there's a good reason people don't really recognize him as much. But I will, admit to an extent that Joss Whedon also really had a big hand in shaping the MCU into what it is with the first and second Avengers movie. I feel like the first one really had a bigger impact on the overall MCU though than the second one, whereas the second one really kind of felt more like filler. But that first Avengers movie really did kind of push for what you could really do in a superhero movie with like a big team. From especially like kind of showing that you can have a consistent continuity from movies that don't necessarily have to all be that don't necessarily have to be sequels. You can have like movies that branch off into their own sequels but still all come together for one amazing cinematic film. As for the DCEU, I don't know of anyone behind the scenes who should get more credit for the MCU that isn't already getting, for the DCEU that isn't already getting credit. I'm sure, there's probably going to be people down the line that goes, "Oh man, this guy did so much for the DCU and he gets no credit." But currently, I can't really think of anyone at the moment, anyways. All right, the next question comes from Gabriel Glacio. Okay, so the first question is really about my thoughts on the season 3 of The Flash when we learned that Barry is Savitar and it's not actually an evil doppelganger, but it was like kind of a clone. I don't know if clone is the right word, but a time variant of Barry Allen, and basically one who became corrupt when he was kind of thrown away. Um, Okay, so my biggest issue, I actually liked season 3 mostly. Like, I didn't like the opening of season 3 because I hated the fact that Flashpoint was like, devoted literally just to one episode, even though that was like the big cliffhanger we ended on with season 2. So I think that was like the first miss, is Flashpoint only being one episode. But then I actually did start to really like season 3 because season 3 did feel a lot like seasons 1 and 2 in a lot of ways. But then the Savitar reveal was probably the worst part about it. And I think the reason I didn't like it is because, this Barry Allen becomes evil because he feels like he's not the real Barry and his friends don't treat him like the real Barry. And that makes no sense to me. I get the drama about like him being upset that Iris chose the other Barry over him, but the idea that Barry would go evil because of that is really ridiculous. And the idea that his friends would just like not acknowledge him as the real Barry Allen also sounds ridiculous. So you have to assume one of two things in order for this story to make sense. You have to assume that everyone on Team Flash is such an asshole that they didn't just like, treat him like he wasn't the real Barry. They treated him like crap until he turned evil. Or you have to assume that Barry Allen himself is an entitled prick, and when things don't go the right way for him, he suddenly turns evil. And I don't like that. That to me is a really bad writing when it comes to a superhero that we're supposed to look up to, because now what you're saying is that, simply things not going that person's way is enough to corrupt him and make him evil. And it's like, well, then he's not really a good superhero if that's all it takes to make him evil. You know what I mean? So I wasn't a big fan of that. I liked a lot of other things about season 3, but the Savitar reveal, I think someone should have like smacked the showrunner over the head. I think it was Todd at the time, who is doing a great job now on Superman and Lois, which is why it's so weird to think it's the same showrunner. But I think someone should have been like, no, Todd, no. you know. All right. Oh, and then the second isn't really a question. It's just his comment saying, I personally loved the season because to me, it was so cool seeing that Barry's friends were turning against him due to Flashpoint. Cisco was angry at him for his brother, when his brother Dante was killed, and cousin, and Caitlin turned into Killer Frost. Okay, yeah, those were aspects about the season I actually really liked. It's I actually did like that it took a minute for Barry to repair that, broken relationship that he had with Cisco. Those were elements of season 3 that I actually really loved about it. And then, I really did like the introduction of Killer Frost. And I kind of loved Caitlin's kind of hypocrisy because she, in the previous season was really kind of guilting, God, what was his name? There was a guy they were trying to make the new Firestorm, but he wasn't interested because he didn't want the idea of having powers. And Caitlin was just like, "What? Who wouldn't want powers? Am I right, Cisco?" Which Cisco at the time was developing his powers, but he was trying to keep it on the down low. And he's like, "Powers, sign me up!" And very sarcastically. So it's kind of funny. One season later, we get Caitlin having powers and now being the one to hide them. I thought that was actually kind of funny. All right, so the next question comes from Chris Crossman. Has the Powerpuff Girls live action been scrapped? It's been a very quiet few months now. I think it has. The moment I think they decided that it wasn't going through was when they had Donald Faison making a cameo on Legends of Tomorrow, because according to the showrunners of Legends of Tomorrow, if the show had gotten renewed, he was going to be playing a much bigger part in the next season, which if they were planning, which means he would have had to have a free schedule for that. So more than likely, they just kind of figured the Powerpuff Girls show wasn't happening, but Donald Faison was already he already had a free enough schedule to work with the CW. So I think the plan was to move him to Legends of Tomorrow instead, but unfortunately that show ended up getting canceled, so that didn't happen. So I think it's safe to say that the Powerpuff Girls show is currently scrapped. Maybe years down the line they might pick it back up. That does happen every now and then, but for now I don't see it happening anytime soon. The next question comes from Jessica Friedman. Do you think the Justice U show is still going to happen after all the after the cancels of Batwoman, Legends, and the Powerpuff Girls live action show? Oh, wait, no, and that's a separate part of it. And is the Powerpuff Girls live action still going to come out? No, I like I said for the previous question, doubt it for that. As for Justice You, last I've heard, it is still technically in development. It's just not one that they really have a specific release date for. I think currently they're still like in the planning phase of it. I think when they announced it, one of the issues is they may have announced it a little bit too soon, and they probably only announced it because they knew the information was going to be leaked at the time. I feel like the show is in such early development that they still don't even have the full idea of what it's going to be yet. So I don't think it's scrapped. I think there's still a good possibility we're going to get it. I just don't think we're going to hear news about it anytime too soon. Hopefully next year. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see for that. And our next question comes from Abaze Nizah. I am so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. What are some of your favorite TV actors and what are some movie and TV actors and characters do you think has been oversaturated or milking? For example, mine is JDF as Tommy. I hear the fan base saying that a lot about Power Rangers, that the Green Ranger is overutilized. I disagree. I mean, it's not like he's in every single season, and it's not like I think the only time I really felt that, honestly, was probably during the 25th anniversary, where they really did kind of make it all about him, even though it wasn't even his season. And I feel like that could have been fixed if they made it like a 2-part episode. But with it only being 1 part and with them having so little time to execute like a big story like the one they were trying to tell, it kind of made sense that JDF had to be the main character for that story to move forward. It just, I think that was the only time I had an issue with it because it really took screen time away from all the other characters that we got to see from several different seasons that we really didn't get to, for new, younger fans, they didn't get to learn too much about them because the episode was focused so much on Tommy. So maybe that was the only time I really felt like he was overutilized. But besides that, I really don't think he's as overrated as a lot of people like to say he is. As for TV characters or actors that I do think are overrated or overutilized, it's a good question, and unfortunately, I don't think I have a good answer for that. Like I can think of shows that feel like they've been milking, but I don't know about characters. You know what? I'm gonna do a quick Google search and then see if I agree with any of these. And then if I do agree with any of these, then I'll use that as my answer. Let's see. Things in. Yeah, I'm not getting any results I necessarily agree with. So I'm sorry, man. I don't really have a good answer for this. I feel really bad for not being able to come up with a good answer. I don't know. I'll come back to that one later on. I wish Adam was here. This is why it helps when I have 2 people to do the live viewer questions. The next one is from Danny Morales, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how I started this episode out with Danny Morales. I've actually just finished up all the questions from May, which means I am currently on June. So hopefully I'll be able to get at least a few done for June, and then hopefully a few more done for the midweek Hero Report series show. So, with this being the 10th Fast and Furious movie coming out next year as part 1, do you think it's really necessary to go see the first part, knowing that the second part will be the true grand finale of the franchise? I mean, yeah, I still think if you like the Fast and Furious franchise, it's worth watching both of them. And if you don't, I really don't think it's worth watching either of them. I feel like if you're gonna, watch it, you kind of want to watch them both side by side. But I guess it's all up to you, though. If you want to just watch the second part, that's also fine too. Maybe if you're on the edge about it, wait for the reviews to come out for the first part. And if the reviews for the first part are basically, intriguing enough for you, then go see it. But if not, then I guess maybe wait for the second part. But personally, I would recommend just seeing both parts regardless. Unless you're not a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise, in which case don't watch either. Our next question comes from Nicole Robinson. What are some classic 80s and 90s sitcoms that you've watched growing up still hold up very well to this day? Perhaps they've been revamped into HD quality for streaming services. Actually, yeah, with specifically That 70s Show, that's one that I feel like actually looks really good now. If you watch it on, like, when it was on Netflix, I remember like the quality looked like it had majorly improved. And for the most part, I still feel like that show really holds up really well. Along with Scrubs, I know like with Scrubs, of course, it's early 2000s sitcom-y kind of a sitcom type of show. So you got like a lot of certain aspects of or certain jokes that you definitely wouldn't see on modern sitcoms now. In fact, I think that show is actually one of the shows that currently have some banned episodes. So I guess Scrubs, That 70s Show are always going to really hold up to me anyways, though, because I think that even if you look past some of the jokes that other people might be offended of, me personally, it's really hard to find a show that has jokes that offend me, because it's just really hard to offend me, honestly, for obvious reasons. But at the same time, like with Scrubs, I feel like when you look at the heart of the show and what the show is really about, that message and just the overall comfort you kind of feel with the characters you get from that show, I feel like that is always going to hold up extremely well. And then That 70s Show is just so much fun, and everyone's just so enjoyable in that of course that's always going to hold up too. I haven't seen Malcolm in the Middle recently, but I do plan on rewatching that show because I used to love that one as a kid, and I hope it kind of holds up. I'm at least hoping anyways. But yeah, I guess those would be some of my answers. There's like a bunch more. I feel like a lot of times on the show we get asked questions about sitcoms, and we're always talking about different sitcoms every time it happens. But yeah, there's just a bunch. And the thing about sitcoms, because the overall messages are usually basic enough to be universal, I do think that a majority of sitcoms do still hold up extremely well. And it doesn't really matter too much when they were made. Obviously, there are definitely some exceptions to that rule. I'm not trying to say every sitcom, but I think for the most part, a majority of sitcoms are still going to hold up today. All right, our next question is going to come from Jericho Gonzalez. All right. Since the announcement of Charlie Cox as Daredevil for the MCU in a new Disney Plus series, if you had to make a guess, what do you think the MCU might make that could keep it connected to the Netflix series, or just for the MCU in general? So basically, like, if it's going to be connected to the Netflix show, or if it's going to be more in line with the MCU. And I think there's going to be a little bit of both. I think that for the most part, it's not going to be a season 4. I do think this is going to be a reboot, but I also don't think they're going to be retconning seasons 1 through 3. I do think it is all going to essentially be connected. But for the most part, I don't really see it necessarily relying on the first 3 seasons. Like, you don't necessarily have to watch those 3 seasons to get what's going to be going on in Daredevil season 4. Or I don't even know why I keep calling it season 4. What's going to be happening in this Daredevil reboot? You don't really necessarily need to know about it, but it's just one of those things. It'll be like Multiverse of Madness. You don't necessarily have to watch WandaVision to know what's going on there, but it really helps if you want the emotional feeling that the movie's trying to give you when watching it. And I think it'll be the same way with Daredevil. I think that there will be a lot more emotional weight if you've watched Daredevil seasons 1 through 3, but I don't think you'll be confused if you go straight into the show. I am also expecting the show to have much more of a lighthearted feeling, which is something that's been going around from comicbook.com. However, I'm not basing it on those articles, because I feel like that's just the most basic thing you could say about the Daredevil show and pretend that it's news. I feel like any news outlet could have said the exact same thing. But regardless, I don't necessarily think they're incorrect by that. I do think that there's a good chance that very likely it's it's going to be not R rated. It's going to have like a PG-13 rating, but it could still be dark, of course. Like, I'm not trying to say that it's going to be watered down, just because something is PG-13 and not R, that doesn't mean it can't still be hardcore. As we kind of saw with Moon Knight. Like, I really do think they did a good job with Moon Knight, even though it never got like as violent as like the Netflix shows. It really did have that kind of same tone as the Netflix shows. And it really, like, to me, Moon Knight always felt like a Marvel Netflix show, but with a budget. And I think that's what we're going to get with the Daredevil reboot. All right. Our next question comes from Carter Matthews. If Hollywood were to reboot Back to the Futures for the modern era, how would that work? And do you think it would be garbage? I mean, as to whether or not it would be garbage, it fully depends. But I think, we were talking about this on Sunday, the idea of rebooting Back to the Future. And even if you don't want to call it Back to the Future, that's totally fine. But I do think that same plot, I would love to see that same plot be used, but for different time eras. Like I was mentioning, Back to the Future was about a kid growing up in the 80s, going back in time to the 50s, right? And back in 2015, 80s nostalgia was pretty big. In fact, it was actually only just kind of drifting away and moving into like 90s nostalgia, right? I feel like that would have been a perfect time to capitalize on that. And you don't necessarily, again, you didn't have to call it Back to the Future, but you really could have done a really cool reboot that would have timeline wise been hilarious, because then you would have had a 2015's kid going back into the 80s and meeting his dad. And it didn't have to be connected to Back to the Future. It could have been a completely different universe. But I feel like that the gags they could have had could have been really good. I feel like the humor would have been great. There's a lot they could have worked with. I love Robert Zemeckis as a director, but I disagree with him when he says like, Back to the Future should never be remade or rebooted. I feel like stories are good because they hold up over time, and there are stories that people can connect to over time. And so I think, one way to capitalize on that would be to kind of, take those stories that, the base story of it is relevant, but you just change up the plot in order to make the plot relevant to modern times. Because, as great as Back to the Future is, it's not the 80s anymore. No one, I don't think anyone out there can relate to a character like Marty McFly. Although, to be fair, Marty McFly is so awesome, I don't think anyone could relate to him to begin with, because he's just that character that everyone wants to be, not that character everyone can relate to. But regardless, I do think that taking that story, giving it a modern plot, and kind of with more modern references, I do think it could work. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be called Back to the Future. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just saying, I just don't think that plot should be kept for that Back to the Future franchise by itself, is kind of where I'm at with the whole thing. Our next question comes from Benjamin. All right. What do you think of Johnny Depp wanting his attorney to replace Amber Heard as Mera in Aquaman 2? I think it's one of the most ridiculous things I have ever seen. Even some fans want that to happen, which is beyond me. This shows the trial was stupid, and Depp himself is a huge a-hole. Man. So this is all about the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial thing, and again, I'm not the person to say who's innocent and who's guilty in this situation. I'm just personally saying the evidence that I have seen definitely leans more towards Amber Heard as the one who is guilty. I definitely haven't heard of Johnny Depp wanting his attorney to replace Amber Heard, but again, that's because I haven't watched the entire trial, only some highlights that Double Toasted talked about every now and then, because I really love their podcast. But I don't know. Like, I haven't heard of anything like this. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it seems kind of weird if it did. Like, I don't know how Johnny Depp can actually get an attorney to replace Amber Heard in Aquaman 2, a movie that he has no association with. The only slight affiliation I can see with him having with Aquaman 2 is the rumor that he did help Amber Heard get her job on Aquaman, which is something that I had heard. but I don't think that means you, just because you help someone get a job somewhere doesn't mean you can be like, oh, hey, I don't like this person now, so fire them. Uh, it's like, it'd be like if I helped a friend get a job at the theater I worked at, but then like a week later we got into an argument and I demanded he was fired. It's just life doesn't work like that. So if that's what Johnny Depp is trying to do, that's a bit bizarre. I think, but I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that. All right. Our next question comes from Roberto uh, Buna, I think. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. So yeah, let's all right, some Billy related questions from Power Rangers. These were probably for Adam, so I do apologize. I'll probably bring these up to Adam later on, so in case he wants to answer these questions for A Plus Hero Report next or this upcoming Wednesday. When did you realize Billy was actually a ladies' man? He literally had tons of girlfriends throughout MMPR and Zeo. Also, why did Zeo fool us into thinking Billy was going to be the Gold Ranger? Okay, so the first part of the question is kind of an easy answer, and it's an unfortunate easy answer, and it just comes down to kind of lazy writing. And I don't mean lazy writing as in the writers just didn't care. I mean lazy writing as in, like, there's 60 episodes in just season 1 alone of MMPR, and not to mention like 40 in season 2. I think a little over 30. I mean, technically probably more than 40 in season 3 if you count the Alien Ranger sagas, and a majority of those episodes are filler. And when you have to make episodes are centered around certain characters and certain aspects of those characters, the easiest one to go to for the nerd character is oh, I'm a nerd, so who's going to want to go out with a guy like me? And unfortunately, they had that trope, or they had that exact storyline several times in MMPR. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where, the first time it happens is for character development. The second time it happens, it's because they're really just trying to pad out Power Rangers, and I think that's what it all kind of comes down to, unfortunately. As for the second part of the question, why did Zeo fool us into thinking Billy was going to be the Gold Ranger? I think they might have actually planned on him being the Gold Ranger originally. I don't think they really had like a plan on who was going to be the Gold Ranger, because I keep hearing it went from the main character from VR Troopers was originally meant to cross over into Power Rangers, because he is played by the same actor, the Gold Ranger, who it ended up actually being. He is played by the same actor from VR Troopers, and I think he was originally meant to be the same character, but then like kind of a last minute change, they decided not to do that. And so either Billy was meant to be the Gold Ranger because of that, or he was meant to just always be a red herring, just because he would have been the most obvious, thing that the kids would have expected. But of course, it ended up being Jason at the end. I thought that was like an incredible twist, so I'm kind of glad they went the way they did. But unfortunately, if it was meant to be Billy, it is unfortunate, because Zeo was the season where, if you kind of look at his performance, it's really obvious that he's just not having a good time on the season. And I think that's just because that's when the harassment, due to his sexuality, just ended up going way too overboard. And that's what ended up causing him to leave the show, unfortunately, later on. I actually just noticed that there are some live viewer questions, and okay, so we got or not live viewer questions, but live comments. So we got Marcelino Vasquez in the live chat. Good to see you. And then we also got Adam in the live chat as well. And because nerds are sexy, LOL. That's why Billy was the man. Yeah, they definitely are. But unfortunately, back in the 90s, people didn't see it that way for some reason. I never understood that. It feels like to me that like nerds became the popular kids in high school right when I graduated high school. Like there's a part of me that wishes I was born like maybe 2 or 3 years earlier, and I feel like I could have actually been one of the cool kids in high school, but who knows. All right, so oh wow, good amount of questions here from Gabriel Glacio. How will the Fantastic Four enter the MCU? Sorry if this rambly. Sorry if this is a rambly post. I have been thinking how the MCU introduced the Fantastic Four. I'd love to see it set in the 60s following the comics. The Four could be working on 60s version of Shield. Reed helps design. I experienced, sorry, experimental technology to go into space, cosmic rays. This could lead them into some wormhole and into a negative zone. In the negative zone, they discover rays that give them powers, and as they come to terms with that, they run into battle Annihilus. The end of the film could show them using an alias tech to fix the ship, the Fantastic Car, the ship / the Fantastic Car, sorry, and end up entering the quantum realm, escaping into modern day. Wow, that is very creative, and I could definitely see something like that happen. So basically, to summarize all of it, the Fantastic Four end up getting trapped in a wormhole where they get their powers, then they escape it, where they come into modern day, and I could definitely see something like that happening in the MCU. I don't know if that's the direction they're going to take with it, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Personally, for me, I don't really have a preference on how the Fantastic Four will be introduced into the MCU. I just part of me really wants Doctor Doom to get introduced before the Fantastic Four, and then also part of me also kind of wants Reed Richards to be introduced into the MCU before he's Mr. Fantastic. Probably won't happen, but it would be cool if they went that direction. Yeah. All right. Next question comes from Oliver Henderson. I think Henry Cavill should return as Superman in the future, even with Warner Brothers being revamped. He is really underrated. Last time we saw him was in Batman v Superman. I know some people don't like him as the Man of Steel because he looks because of how he looks physically, but he is really good. I mean, I agree with this. I really do like Henry Cavill as an actor, and I thought he was a really good choice for Superman. Whenever I talk about how I'm not a big fan of Dawn of Justice, for the most part, my complaints about Dawn of Justice are not actually at the actors, except for Jesse Eisenberg. I still think that was like one of the weirdest, bizarre choices for casting. But I do think Henry Cavill was definitely a really good choice for Superman. I just would have personally utilized him a little bit differently. I would have loved to have seen his acting in a show like Superman and Lois, for example. I think he could really nail that type of Superman if they really wanted to go in that direction. Who knows? Maybe he could return in the future DCU universe gets rebooted, since Flash is supposed to change things. If we can have a new Batman with Michael Keaton returning, new Batman universe with Robert Pattinson, we can have Henry Cavill back as Superman. And I do fully agree. I do hope, like with a lot of the changes coming to the DCEU, one of the things that they look at is, a lot of people actually really happen to like Henry Cavill, so maybe we should keep him. Obviously, Ben Affleck, not happening. He's done with Batman. And, again, it's not because necessarily it's not because like the movies didn't work or because people didn't like him as Batman. It's because he himself didn't enjoy playing Batman. So, we're likely not going to be seeing him return as Batman in the future. Who do you think will be the villain for Deadpool 3? And what do you think the sorry would be if you could speculate? Who do you think would be the villain for Deadpool 3? And what do you think the sorry would be if you could I don't know what you mean by sorry, what the sorry would be if you could speculate. The villain for Deadpool 3. Man, I would assume some X-Men. I would assume they would get an X-Men villain to be the main villain for Deadpool 3. I'm not sure which one. It would either be that, or I could also see like not necessarily there being a villain in the movie, but Deadpool being the closest thing to a villain, and really the antagonist to Deadpool is the Avengers themselves. Um, oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, it might have meant you might have meant sorry or story instead of sorry. So what do you think the story would be? I think the story will probably be him just like being teleported into the MCU and happen to you know figure out where he fits within the MCU. That's probably my guess of where they might go with the story. I also just realized I think I forgot to say the name of the person whose email I was reading. It was Kurt Marino. So I do apologize for not mentioning the name earlier. So yeah, that question was from Kurt Marino. The next question is going to be from Marcelino Vasquez, and I think I'll do this one and then one more question, and then that might be it for the day. So here we go. Um, I think this is less of a question and more of a statement just about like Black Panther, Marcelino Vasquez predicting who's going to be the next villain. So yeah, I'll just go to the next question. I think this will be the last question for the day. This comes from Michael Rhymes. With the HBO Max series Peacemaker, perhaps getting with the HBO Max series Peacemaker perhaps getting a second season, who do you think the villain should be, and what do you want to see different compared to the first season? And also connect and clarify. Wait. And also connect and clarify from 2021 Suicide Squad movie. Wait. um So I think what you mean is like what connections to the Suicide Squad movie do you want to see in Peacemaker season 2? Uh, so I think villain wise, I really don't know because knowing James Gunn, he'll probably go for kind of like the C D list villains, like the ones that not a lot of people really know about. So I really don't think I don't think it's going to be a well known villain. That's kind of like the main thing. So the other thing is too, if we're going to have anyone kind of connected from the 2021 movie, I would really love to see Idris Elba come back in Peacemaker season 2, just because I think the two of them had great chemistry, and because they didn't end things off on exactly a good note during the 2021 Suicide Squad movie, I would definitely love to see a confrontation between the two of them, and I would love to see the two of them being forced to work together again, and maybe even have Bloodsport actually acknowledge that Peacemaker has kind of become a better person. Not saying they have to be best buds by the end of it, but it would be kind of cool to see them working together again. What stereotypes do you think movies and TV shows still do these days? Well, actually, one stereotype I've actually been kind of thinking about a lot is the kind of typical nerd stereotype, which you see a lot in TVs and movies still, even now with nerds actually kind of being more the cool kids now in high school. It is kind of funny that you still got kind of people who grew up going to high school in the 80s writing movies. So of course, if they're ever writing movies, more than likely you'll still have like the nerds that are just like not the cool kids essentially. But yeah, other than that, I feel like stereotypes really just kind of change decade after decade. So I feel like there aren't too many that are overused as much as there used to be. You still do have like some that are very negative and unfortunately not really used in the best of light, whether it comes to racial or sexuality kind of stereotypes. But you don't see them as much anymore, which is a good thing. But at the same time, they are still out there. And it's why, I think it's always important as a writer to always just be careful, when writing, just, because you don't want to rely on the same stereotypes as your joke, because that comes off as extremely lowbrow. And it's just, it's just not that funny anymore. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think the most common one I still see is the nerd stereotype trope, and then also kind of the jocks being assholes kind of trope. Don't get me wrong, I played football in high school, so of course I knew a bunch of jocks, but most of them were surprisingly not assholes. The only ones that could come off as assholes were kind of like some of the wide receivers, but mostly like anyone who ever played quarterback. Actually, I will say that like the many quarterbacks I've known throughout the years of high school have always fit the jock stereotype of being like kind of the total assholes, basically. But when it comes to just, people who played sports, not all of them were actually as much of an asshole as like, the media pretends they are, not all of them were like bullies or anything like that, at least in my personal high school experience. It might have also been because even though I wasn't necessarily part of the jock clique, I was still like a football player. So maybe I didn't get bullied by them because of that. Who knows? But yeah, I think like the jock stereotype is also a little bit overdone at this point. So yeah, I think that's going to wrap up the questions for today. But yeah, we'll hopefully cover more of these on Wednesday. But until then, everyone, as Adam says, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. But of course, guys, above all, do not forget to keep it A+. I will talk to you all later.